This Dimecast episode is sponsored by the bloggers at Code Better and Devilicious. Stuff you need to code better. Visit us online at codebetter.com and Devilicious. That's CODEBETTER.com and DEVLICIO.us. Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to revisit one of the design patterns that we've already taken a look at, the observer pattern. We're going to do this because in the original episode I showed one way that you can implement this pattern, but what is really great about design pattern is that depending on your language that you're developing in, there may be multiple ways you can implement a pattern. And depending on your preference and or your particular needs, the way you implement it might change. In this episode, I'm going to demonstrate how we can implement the observer pattern by utilizing function callbacks and events. If you're not familiar with either of those concepts, either delegates, function callbacks, or events, please grab one of our other episodes where we talk about those concepts in more detail. Now, before we get started, let's go ahead and take a look at the existing code base. I have a unit test here which will create an instance of our warehouse. And our warehouse is the storage repository where we make calls into and then notifications are sent out from. And when you create a warehouse, you can attach observers to that warehouse. So we'll attach a West Hollywood store, Chicago store, whatever the case may be. And then when you call into the warehouse, they remove product from inventory. It would then notify each of the individual stores that, hey, by the way, you no longer have 5 of these widgets in inventory. This works. It's pretty cool. But we could actually do it in 2 different ways. So let's go ahead and take a look at our warehouse class here. Bounce over. I'm going to copy and paste our original warehouse class. And I'm going to call this with callback. Now we have this new warehouse with callback class, and we need to change it a little bit. What we're going to want to do is we actually want to use the action keyword or the action feature that's part of .NET. So let's go ahead and we're going to comment this out for a minute. And what we're going to do is we're going to use action. And we know that whenever we want to notify a store or something, we need to tell it of a SKU and a amount to remove. So I'm going to make this an action of string and then 32. So I've created my callback there. So I'm going to pass in a callback. And instead of storing a list of stores, we want to change this. We'll call this observers because we're no longer observing a store. And we're going to change the thing that, the list of stores signature to be an iList of callbacks. And then we could actually, we don't want to do that. Let's do that. So what we're going to do is when we say attach an observer, we're just going to add that callback to the list. And we're not going to worry about the detach for this episode, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that just to get that out of our way. And then when we have our method that says remove product from inventory, it's going to call a method notify observing stores of inventory removal. And instead of looping through all the observers and calling a particular method, we're going to say store.invoke and simply pass in, if I can spell it correctly, our SKU and the amount that we want to remove. And we've done it. We've essentially re-architected our warehouse so that it no longer knows about a particular store. It only knows about an action to call on a store object. So let's come up back over to our unit test. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. I'm going to rename my warehouse and my unit test. And instead of attaching, when we call attach, instead of actually passing it the object of a store, we're going to want to give it a callback. So we'll say Hollywood store, and then we need to find a method that matches our callback signature and provide that. And I'll explain that here in a second, a little bit more detail after I finish the Chicago store. So what we've done is we have replaced the passing in of an actual object into our observer method with the passing in of a function callback, and we can get the same results. Now the downside to this is because we don't actually know about the individual store, we're going to have to remove this logic because we can't actually query for stores from our warehouse anymore. If that's a problem for you, either you may want to implement this differently or stay with the original implementation. Now let's put a breakpoint right here, and let's see if we can get the same result. And that same result should be that when I call remove from inventory, each of the individual stores which are being observed, or do the observing, will be notified of that. So if I step into this, I can step into my notify, and I'll look at my observers, and I have 2. Now if I step and go through this loop, when it gets to the invoke, it should bounce into my abstract class, which is for store. And I can sit there and I can see that it's actually going to remove for each individual store. And when it's all said and done, I've now removed inventory from my warehouse, which has then notified each of the individual stores to remove inventory as well. Now, one thing we could actually do is, because we have the ability to peer into our classes here, we can actually take a look at, each of the individual stores and see that, take a look at their inventory and see that, product ABC now has 8, whereas when it was originally defined, it had 10. So we can see we get the exact same result. So one way we could do this is with callbacks. The other way we could do this is with events. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to do that right now. So now that we've seen how to do it with callbacks, let's go ahead and do it with events. I'm going to copy and create a new copy of our warehouse. And I'm going to call this with events. I'm going to go ahead and delete the detach again because, again, we're not going to terribly worry about that. Now, when we're dealing with events, again, I don't want to necessarily attach a store to it. I want to have the warehouse raise an event and notify each of the individual listeners that something's going on. So we need to go ahead, first thing we need to do is actually create a event for it. So we'll do public delegate. And we'll call this notify of inventory removal. Need to make this a void. So we've created our delegate here. Let's go ahead and create our event. So we now have an event here. So what we can do is, instead of having a list of stores that are being observed, we no longer are going to have our warehouse actually know about any of these stores. But what we're going to do is say, come in here and say if notify of removal is not equal to null, we'll then say notify removal, and we'll say SKU amount to remove. And this will then just broadcast this to anybody who is listening. So we can go ahead and get rid of this as well. Now, in order to do this, we're going to have to change this around a little bit. And let's actually take a look at a unit test to see exactly how I plan on doing this. So currently, when we create an instance of a store, we just tell it the store's name, for example. I want to modify the store so that when we create an instance of the store, we actually tell it the warehouse that it belongs to. So let's go to our abstract store class real quick. And we're going to say this is warehouse with events. We're going to go ahead and have this initialize an auto property from this. Actually, you know what? We don't want to do that. What we're going to do instead is just simply do this. Warehouse. And we're going to say notify of inventory removal. And because the signature of our event completely matches our remove inventory from SKU method, I can simply attach the event to that method. And now, whenever I create an instance of a store, I should be able to pass in the warehouse and have it wire up the events for me. So now I've gone through and I've updated all my base classes. Let's bounce over to our unit test again. And we're going to provide our warehouse. And I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint here. Let's remove some of those I accidentally created. Let's rerun this unit test and see if we can get the same result by utilizing events instead. So I can come here. I'm going to go ahead and step into this again. And you'll see that I don't have a null here, so I'm going to go ahead and do an update, or allow it to broadcast. And then come into one store and I can remove the inventory. And it should actually come in here again, and sure enough it does. This is because it's been broadcast to multiple instances of a store object. And if I step through this, keep going, if I come back down to my warehouse store, my Hollywood store, the inventory, which originally started off as 10, is now 8. And Chicago store should start off at 12. And it should be 10 now. And sure enough, it is. So there you have it. In the original episode, I showed you one way to implement the observer pattern. In this episode, I've taken a look at how to implement it with a callback as well as with events. So you can see there's at least 3 different ways to implement this pattern, and chances are there's another half dozen. So I hope you learned something, and until next time.